I never expected this to happen. I mean, sure, I've heard stories, everyone has, but I never thought I'd be the one involved in something like this. Ethan and I had been friends for years. We grew up together, shared the same childhood memories, and built an unbreakable bond over the years. He wasn't just my best friend, he was family. We worked together, hung out together, and spent countless nights talking about everything, our future dreams, silly things that made us laugh, or the worst mistakes we'd ever made. I'd always thought we could rely on each other no matter what. But over the past few months, things started to shift. At first, it was small, unnoticeable. Just little things that made me pause and wonder if something was off. Ethan had always been a bit of a workaholic, but recently it felt like it was getting worse. He would disappear into his office more often, take phone calls late into the night, even on weekends. I'd see him lose himself in his phone, staring at the screen like it was the only thing that mattered. And every time I'd try to reach out, he'd just brush it off. Busy with work, he'd say. But something didn't feel right. It wasn't like the old Ethan I knew, the one who always made time for his friends, no matter how chaotic his schedule was. I noticed it with Vanessa too. Ethan's wife. She was always so vibrant before, full of life and energy, but lately she seemed different. It wasn't just the distance I could feel when we were together. She seemed distracted, distant in a way I couldn't quite explain. Sometimes when we hung out, I'd catch her glancing at her phone, her face clouded with something that didn't sit well with me. I tried to ignore it at first, to tell myself it was just a phase or that she was going through something personal. Maybe work was stressing her out, or maybe she was just dealing with something I didn't understand. But the more I spent time with them both, the more things didn't add up. I started noticing how uncomfortable she was in the conversations we had. She'd avoid eye contact, or when I'd joke around with her, she'd smile, but it was forced. Like she wasn't really present. It didn't sit right, and it made me uneasy. I wasn't the kind of person to jump to conclusions without proof, but something about the way she carried herself made it impossible to ignore the nagging feeling in my chest. One evening, Ethan invited me over for dinner. It was just the three of us, Ethan, Vanessa, and me. The atmosphere was off. There was a weird tension in the air, and it wasn't the usual easygoing vibe we had when the three of us hung out. It felt like something was hanging over us, something unspoken. They both seemed a little more quiet than usual, and I found myself constantly glancing at them, wondering what was going on behind their eyes. But I didn't want to pry. I didn't want to make things awkward, so I kept my thoughts to myself. I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that I was just overthinking things. But then something happened that changed everything. After dinner, we were all sitting in the living room, chatting, and Vanessa stepped out to get us drinks. As she left, I noticed Ethan's phone on the coffee table. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but that day, for some reason, I felt an overwhelming urge to look at it. I didn't know why. It wasn't like me to invade someone's privacy, but the tension in the room, the strange behavior, it pushed me to the edge. I glanced around, making sure no one was watching, and before I knew it, I was holding Ethan's phone in my hands. I hesitated. My heart was pounding. I felt guilty, like I was about to cross a line I shouldn't. But curiosity got the best of me. I unlocked the phone, just a glance, I told myself. I didn't plan to stay long or dig into his personal life, but then I saw something that I couldn't ignore. There it was, staring back at me, messages, but not just any messages. These were texts between Vanessa and someone I knew. My stomach dropped. It was my brother. The same brother I grew up with, shared secrets with, and trusted more than anyone in my life. The messages weren't just innocent chat, they were intimate. Words that should never be exchanged between a married woman and my brother. It wasn't just flirtation or lighthearted banter. It was deeper. It was secretive. They talked about moments I couldn't comprehend, the kind of things that made me sick to my stomach. I froze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This wasn't just a casual flirtation. This was an affair. And it wasn't just with some stranger, no, it was with my brother. I wanted to put the phone down, to pretend like I hadn't seen anything. But I couldn't. I felt like I was trapped, forced to read every word, each one cutting deeper than the last. What do I do now? My mind raced. What had been going on for how long? Was this a recent thing, or had it been happening for months? And why did they have to do this to Ethan? Why did they have to do this to me, to us? I had to stop reading. I couldn't bear to see any more. But in that moment, everything changed. The illusion of a perfect friendship, a perfect marriage, it was shattered. I didn't know what to do next. I wanted to scream, to confront them both, but I couldn't. I was too stunned, too conflicted. I knew I had to make a decision. Do I tell Ethan what I know and ruin everything? Or do I keep quiet and pretend I didn't see it, knowing the truth would eat me alive every day? The tension between us all felt unbearable, and I knew that whatever I decided, nothing would ever be the same. It happened by accident. At least that's how I tried to justify it to myself later, as if somehow that would make me feel less guilty. It wasn't like I went looking for it. I didn't actively set out to uncover something that would change everything. But there I was, standing in Ethan's living room, holding my breath, trying not to make a sound. I remember the moment so clearly. Vanessa had stepped out to the kitchen, leaving her phone on the coffee table beside me. Normally I wouldn't even think twice about touching someone else's phone, let alone snooping through it. But that night something in the air was different. Maybe it was the way Vanessa had been acting lately, or how Ethan had seemed off too. There was something about the silence that hung over us, like both of them were hiding something. Maybe that's what triggered the curiosity in me, or maybe it was just the tension, the way the world felt like it was leaning in too close. Whatever it was, I couldn't look away from the phone. I glanced over at the door to make sure Vanessa wasn't walking back. She wasn't. Ethan was still in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, lost in his thoughts. I knew that there was no harm in just quickly glancing at the screen. I didn't think I'd find anything important. Maybe it was just my mind overthinking things, but I needed to know. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling, the thought that something wasn't right between them. So without really thinking, I picked up the phone and unlocked it. My heart pounded in my chest as I hovered over the screen. I couldn't believe I was doing this. What kind of friend was I? What kind of person? But there was no turning back now. The screen lit up, revealing the last few messages on the phone. My breath caught in my throat. It was a conversation between Vanessa and someone I knew. I didn't recognize the name at first, but then I saw the profile picture. It hit me like a punch to the gut. My brother. The very person who'd been in my life since I could remember. The person I'd shared everything with. The person I trusted more than anyone. How could this be happening? How could this be real? The conversation wasn't casual, not in the slightest. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. There were messages, long strings of them, full of secretive language and words that felt too intimate, too close for comfort. They weren't just talking about their day or sharing a laugh over something trivial. No, these messages were loaded with emotion, words that made me sick. There were promises in there, things I could barely understand, things I shouldn't have been reading. Vanessa had written about missing my brother, about how much she needed him. He, in turn, told her he felt the same, that their time together was something she couldn't forget. I felt my stomach twist in knots. My mind couldn't process it. It was impossible to understand. They were having an affair. Not just any affair, but an affair that had been going on for longer than I could imagine. This wasn't some one-night mistake or something that happened once. No, this was a full-blown betrayal of Ethan, of our friendship, of everything I thought I knew about them both. I didn't want to believe it. My brain kept searching for an explanation, trying to justify what I was reading. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. Maybe it wasn't as serious as it seemed. But deep down I knew better. I couldn't look away. The words kept coming, each one confirming what I had feared. Vanessa talked about how she felt trapped, like she was living a lie. She even said she loved him, loved my brother. I could barely wrap my head around it. My hands shook as I read, and my throat felt tight. What was I supposed to do now? What was I supposed to think? The worst part was how long it had been going on. I had no idea how far back it went, how deep the deception ran. But from the messages, it was clear that this wasn't just a fling. This wasn't a mistake. This was something they both chose, something they'd been hiding for God knows how long. And now here I was, holding the proof in my hands, feeling like I was drowning in it. The weight of the betrayal crushed me. I wasn't just hurt by Vanessa, I was hurt by my brother too. How could he do this? How could he be part of something that would destroy his own family, his own brother's life? I felt sick. Betrayed in a way I couldn't explain. I wanted to put the phone down, to forget what I had just read, but I couldn't. It was like a train wreck that I couldn't look away from. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room and demand answers from both of them. How dare they do this? How dare they bring me into this mess? But as I sat there, reading the messages again, I realized something else. I knew that I couldn't unsee what I had just discovered. There was no going back now. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen the truth. I couldn't ignore it. The truth was right in front of me, staring me in the face. The trust I had in both of them was gone. Vanessa had shattered it by letting this affair happen, and my brother, my own flesh and blood, had joined her in the deception. My mind raced. What do I do now? Do I tell Ethan? Do I risk tearing apart his world and my friendship with him? Or do I stay silent and let this secret eat me alive? Either way, there was no easy answer. I felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of what I knew. There was no right decision, no easy way to fix this. I put the phone back on the table, trying to steady my shaking hands. My heart was still pounding in my chest, and I couldn't breathe. How long could I keep this secret? How long could I live with the knowledge that my best friend was living a lie? And more importantly, how could I ever look at my brother the same way again? I couldn't believe what I had just seen. It didn't feel real. It was like my mind was playing tricks on me, trying to convince me that I had misread the messages, that maybe I had misunderstood something. But I knew the truth, and the truth was suffocating. Vanessa, my best friend's wife, had been cheating on him, and not just with anyone. No, it was with my brother, the one person I had trusted my whole life. The person I grew up with, shared secrets with, and thought would always have my back. I sat there in a daze, staring at the phone, trying to process what I had just read. It wasn't just a passing moment of doubt. It wasn't something that could be brushed off as a mistake. It was a betrayal that ran deep, something I couldn't ignore, no matter how badly I wanted to. My brain couldn't seem to wrap itself around the situation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone and confront them both, but at the same time, I felt paralyzed. I didn't know what to do. My whole world had just been turned upside down, and I was left sitting in the middle of it, unable to move. I kept asking myself over and over, how long had this been going on? Had it been weeks, months, longer? The thought of Vanessa and my brother together behind Ethan's back made my stomach churn, and then the guilt set in. I knew I had the power to stop it, to tell Ethan the truth, but something held me back. Something deep inside told me that telling him would destroy him. It would break him, and I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to be the one to do that. The truth wasn't always easy to face, and I knew that exposing this betrayal would rip his world apart. Ethan had been my best friend for years. I didn't want to be the one to shatter his entire life. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming back. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the messages flashing before me. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape the fact that Vanessa had lied to his face for who knows how long. I couldn't escape the fact that my own brother was involved in something so vile. The trust I had in both of them was gone, shattered beyond repair. But the worst part was that I was the one who knew. I was the one carrying this secret, and I didn't know how to handle it. I thought about confronting them. I thought about calling them out, dragging the truth into the open. But then I thought about Ethan. How would he react? Would he even believe me? Would he hate me for telling him? For being the one to bring such a painful truth into his life? I could see the hurt in his eyes already, even though I hadn't said a word. I could imagine the way his world would crumble, and the thought of causing that kind of pain made me sick to my stomach. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't just let it go. I couldn't let them get away with it. How could I live with myself, knowing the truth and not saying anything? I felt like I was betraying Ethan all over again, just by keeping the secret. But the longer I stayed silent, the more it felt like I was sinking into quicksand. The guilt was unbearable, and the more I tried to push it away, the more it consumed me. I kept telling myself that I needed time to think, that I needed to process everything before I made any decisions. But that didn't make it any easier. Every time I saw Ethan or Vanessa, I felt this heavy weight pressing down on me. When I was around them, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were both hiding something. Their smiles felt forced, like they were pretending everything was fine when I knew the truth. It was suffocating. I couldn't look at them the same way anymore. And every time I looked at my brother, I saw the guilt in his eyes, like he was waiting for me to find out. One night, Ethan called me over to his place. It wasn't unusual for us to hang out, but this time there was something different about his tone. He didn't sound like himself. There was an edge to his voice, like he was on the verge of saying something, but wasn't sure how to bring it up. As I walked into the house, I could feel the tension in the air. It was thick, almost as if the walls themselves were closing in around me. Ethan was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, but he wasn't focused. He kept glancing at me, like he was waiting for me to say something, or maybe waiting for me to bring up the elephant in the room. I didn't know how to handle it. I wanted to tell him everything, to tell him what I had seen, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The words caught in my throat, stuck like a lump that I couldn't swallow. I wanted to shout at him, to confront him with the truth, but I just stood there, paralyzed by the fear of what would happen if I did. Ethan didn't say much at first. He just kept looking at me like he was trying to figure out if I knew something. The silence between us was suffocating. I could tell he was struggling with something, but I didn't know what. Maybe he had his suspicions, maybe he didn't. I didn't know. All I knew was that whatever was going on, it was tearing him apart from the inside. It wasn't until later that night, when we were sitting in the living room, that Ethan finally asked me the question that I had been dreading. "Do you know anything?" "About Vanessa," he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart skipped a beat. The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell him everything was fine and pretend that nothing had changed. But I couldn't. I couldn't lie to him. The truth was already hanging in the air, and I knew that somehow I was the only one who could bring it into the light. But how? How could I tell him what I knew? How could I break his heart when I was the one who had to carry the weight of it all? I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as Ethan's question lingered in the room, suffocating me. My throat went dry, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words I had wanted to say, the truth I had been holding onto so tightly, were right there at the tip of my tongue. But I couldn't speak. How could I? How could I be the one to destroy everything? To ruin his trust in me? To unravel everything we had built over the years? I looked at Ethan, trying to read his face, but it was a blank mask. He was waiting for me to say something, anything. The silence between us stretched on, unbearable, suffocating. It felt like the walls were closing in on me, and I was trapped. I wanted to tell him the truth, to finally break the dam that had been holding everything back, but I couldn't make myself do it. The weight of the secret was too much, and the fear of what telling him would do to him, to our friendship, was even worse. His eyes never left mine. "Is there something you're not telling me?" His voice was soft, almost like he was asking me to help him make sense of something. But I knew better. He wasn't just asking out of curiosity. He knew something wasn't right. The tension between us had been building for weeks, and I had no idea how much longer I could keep this lie from him. I thought about the messages again, the words that had burned into my mind, the images of Vanessa and my brother that I couldn't shake. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, their secret, their betrayal. My brother had done this to me, and Vanessa had done this to Ethan. I could hear her laughing in the background, her voice sweet and intimate, as she shared secrets with someone she wasn't supposed to be sharing them with. But I couldn't tell Ethan that. I couldn't ruin him with that knowledge. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. My mouth felt dry, like I had swallowed a lump of concrete. It was like the truth was a weight on my chest, pressing me down, making it impossible to breathe. I felt trapped, suffocated by the choice I had to make. Do I tell him everything, tear apart the fragile world around us, or do I stay silent and carry this burden alone? Ethan looked at me for a moment longer before he sighed and dropped his gaze. I don't know what to do anymore." His voice cracked a little, and for the first time since all of this started, I saw a crack in his armor. I saw the vulnerability in him that I hadn't noticed before. It hurt to see him like this, struggling with something that was beyond his control. I know things haven't been great between us lately, he continued, his voice low. I feel like we're drifting apart. And it's like something's wrong, but I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's me or if it's her, or if it's both of us. But something feels off, and I can't shake the feeling that she's hiding something from me. His words hit me like a slap to the face. He was already starting to suspect something, but he had no idea how deep the betrayal ran. My heart broke for him. He deserved better than this. He deserved the truth, but I wasn't sure I could give it to him. I wanted to tell him everything, to make it stop. To let him know what I knew, to tell him that the woman he loved had been betraying him. But the words caught in my throat. I wanted to protect him. I wanted to shield him from the pain that was coming. But the longer I waited, the more it felt like I was just as guilty as the people who had hurt him. I don't know what to do, man, Ethan continued, his voice almost pleading. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can fix this. I feel like I'm losing everything, and I can't even figure out why. His words broke me. I had never seen him like this before. Ethan had always been the strong one, the one who kept everything together, who always knew what to do. But now it felt like he was falling apart right in front of me, and I was the one holding the key to the answers. I finally spoke, but my voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan, I didn't even know how to start. How could I? How could I tell him that his wife, the woman he trusted, had been cheating on him with my brother? It felt like the world would end if I said it aloud, but I knew I couldn't keep hiding the truth forever. I don't know what to tell you, I said quietly, my voice shaking. But whatever it is, man, I think you need to know the truth. You can't keep living in the dark. Ethan's eyes locked onto mine, searching my face, trying to read me. He was waiting for me to say more, but I didn't know what to say. The words felt like they were stuck in my throat, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get them out. I need to know, man, Ethan said, his voice desperate. Please, whatever it is, just tell me. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing on me, suffocating me. I wanted to break down, to scream, to tell him everything, but I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to destroy him, to destroy everything. Instead, I stood up and walked toward the window, my hands trembling. I couldn't look at him anymore. I couldn't look at his broken face, the one that was searching for answers I wasn't ready to give. I needed time. I needed to figure out what to do. I'm sorry, Ethan, I whispered. I can't do this right now. I turned and left before he could say anything else, before he could push me any further. I walked out into the night, my heart heavy with guilt and confusion. I didn't know how much longer I could keep this secret. I didn't know how much longer I could watch him fall apart without telling him the truth. But I knew one thing for sure the moment I did. Everything would change, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. I couldn't stop thinking about that night, about the look on Ethan's face when I left. It haunted me, every second of every day. I could feel the weight of the secret growing heavier, crushing me from the inside out. It was like a ticking time bomb, and I knew I couldn't hold it in much longer. But every time I thought about telling him the truth, a new wave of fear washed over me. What would happen if I did? What would happen to Ethan, to me, to everything we had built over the years? I had been avoiding Vanessa and my brother for days. I couldn't look them in the eye. I couldn't even bring myself to talk to them. The shame and guilt were too much. I could still see the way they looked at each other, their smiles full of secrets, knowing that they were betraying the one person who had always been there for both of them. I could still feel the weight of the betrayal hanging over me. It was like a dark cloud, following me everywhere I went. But Ethan was the one who was suffering the most. Every time I saw him, he looked more and more like a shell of the person I used to know. His eyes were hollow, tired. It was clear that he was falling apart, and I was the one who knew why. I was the one who had the power to stop it, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I hadn't heard from him in a few days, and I knew it was because I hadn't said anything. I knew he was waiting for me to give him the answers he needed, but I wasn't ready to give them. Every time I picked up my phone, I hesitated. I didn't know how to start the conversation, Didn't know how to break the news to him that his world was about to come crashing down. I couldn't keep avoiding him, though. The guilt was suffocating me. The longer I stayed silent, the more it felt like I was complicit in the betrayal. Every time I looked at him, I saw the pain in his eyes, and I couldn't take it anymore. I knew what I had to do, even if I wasn't ready for the fallout. I finally called him. My hands were shaking, my heart racing in my chest. I knew this was it. The moment where everything changed. Ethan answered on the second ring, his voice low and tired. "Hey," he said, his tone heavy, like he knew something was coming. "Ethan," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him exhale slowly, as if he had been holding his breath, waiting for me to speak. "Yeah, I think we do," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been waiting for you to say something. I've been thinking about everything, about Vanessa, about us. And I know something's wrong. I just don't know what it is. I need to know." My stomach twisted into knots. I had to do this. I couldn't back out now. But as I opened my mouth to speak, the words wouldn't come. I choked on the truth, unable to say what I knew he needed to hear. "Ethan," I said again, trying to steady my voice. I don't know how to say this. But, Vanessa," I paused, struggling to find the right words. "He's been cheating on you. With my brother." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. For a moment I thought he hadn't heard me, that maybe I had imagined saying it. But then I heard his breath catch, and I knew he had. I knew it had hit him like a ton of bricks. What his voice was barely audible, like he couldn't even believe what I was saying. "What did you just say?" I repeated it more firmly this time, even though it felt like I was breaking apart inside. "Vanessa has been cheating on you with my brother. I found the messages. I saw everything." There was a long, painful silence. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end, like he was trying to process what I had just said. I knew it was too much for him to take in all at once, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear what he was going to say next. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Ethan's voice broke through the silence, filled with disbelief and hurt. "Why did you wait? Why didn't you tell me when you first found out?" I felt a pang of guilt stab through me. I didn't know how. I didn't know if you were ready to hear it. I didn't want to destroy everything for you. "Everything's already destroyed," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I can't believe this. I can't believe she would do this to me. To us." The pain in his voice was almost too much to bear. It tore through me, knowing that I was the one who had to bring him this truth. I had always thought of myself as his protector, the person who would always have his back, no matter what. But now I was the one tearing him apart. "I'm sorry, man," I said quietly, my voice full of regret. "I should have told you sooner. I should have done something." "I don't even know what to say to you right now," Ethan replied, his voice distant, like he was speaking from a place far away. "I don't know how to process any of this." I could hear him struggling to breathe, trying to keep his composure, but I knew he was falling apart. The man I had known for years, the one who had always been so strong, was unraveling right before my eyes, and it was because of me. "I never thought she'd do something like this," he continued, his voice shaking. I thought we were happy. I thought everything was fine." "I know, Ethan," I said, my heart breaking for him. "I'm sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this." There was another long silence, and I could hear Ethan's breath coming in shallow gasps. "What do I do now?" he asked, the vulnerability in his voice almost unbearable. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what he should do. I didn't even know what I should do. The only thing I knew for sure was that the truth had come out, and there was no going back. Everything had changed. And I didn't know if it was possible to fix what had been broken. "I don't know, man," I whispered. "I don't know what you should do." The call ended soon after, leaving me in the silence of my own thoughts. I sat there staring at my phone, my chest tight with the weight of everything that had happened. The truth was out now, and there was no taking it back. I didn't know what Ethan would do, but I knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again.